Yes.
Well, there's 2 times you had to do this. All right. Okay. Now, I think we're live on Facebook.
Now it's working. Yay.
All right. Well, it only took 5 minutes. That's pretty good.
Pretty good. All right. I'm going to eat dinner with Rachel. See you later.
All right.
Bye.
All right. So good evening again. I'm glad we are gathered here. And so since it took us 5 minutes to get started, I'm going to share my screen where I've got all my pictures and notes, and that way we'll walk through and we can learn. I can do a lot of talking, and anyone wants to chime in can do it. So now let me share the screen. Okay. So unless I can't change my, there it is. Okay. So we're going to talk about the Passion story in art and film. And today we're talking about the crucifixion in art and film. And just really that scene. We've had 2 other weeks in which we walked through, in essence, most of the Passion story in art and film. But today is just the crucifixion. And so just a little bit about where we find the story of the crucifixion, of course, is in all 4 of our Gospels. Now, the verses that I have listed here are just the scene of the crucifixion until the moment Jesus dies. And as you can tell, there's a large number of verses in there, especially in Matthew's gospel. That's quite a number of verses, and John has a few. Mark may be the shortest kind of telling here. Matthew and Luke follow along, and John, as always, tells his own version of the story. But I wanted to remind everybody about the Passion story. The Passion story, basically from Palm Sunday until the resurrection, that whole section of scripture was one of the first to be put down to paper. It was the story people wanted to tell immediately. Christians in the first century wanted to make sure that part of the story of Jesus got recorded. And it's actually like that 1 week takes up a lot of each of these Gospels, percentage-wise. That's just a little tidbit. But I did want us, and you can jot these scripture down, go back and look at how the story is told. But I did want to share a little bit from John 19, okay? And so I'm going to skip a few verses as I share. I'm just going to highlight a few just to remind us some key figures. That way, when we look at the art, we can be looking for them. So from John 19, as they took Jesus and carrying the cross by himself, he went out to what is called the place of the skull, which in Hebrew is Golgotha. As they crucified him with the 2 others, one on either side. And Pilate also put an inscription written and put on the cross. It read, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." And the story says it was written in Hebrew and Latin and in Greek. So that later on in the story, when the soldiers had crucified Jesus, they took his clothes, divided them in 4 parts, one for each soldier. They also took his tunic. Now the tunic was seamless, woven in 1 piece from the top. So they said to one another, "Let us not tear it, but cast lots for it to see who gets it." This was to fulfill what the scripture said. They divided my clothes among themselves, and for my clothing they cast lots. So it says, meanwhile, standing near the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. Listen to that again. Standing near the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. And when Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing beside her, he said to his mother, "Woman, here is your son." And a little while later in the scripture, Jesus says, "I am thirsty." And a jar of sour wine was standing there. So they put a sponge full of wine on a branch of hyssop and held it to his mouth. And when Jesus had finished the wine, he said, "It is finished." And he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. So that gives us a little bit of some parts of the story to keep watch for in our picture. Now, before we look at some art, I want to remind us a little bit about the crucifixion in the first century and the way Rome used crucifixion. The Roman government used crucifixion as a form of capital punishment, and it was for slaves and criminals. And it probably was carried out a little differently than we would have it in most of our art. The crucifixion, usually they think in Roman time, that the vertical poles were already in the ground, and then they would fix the people to the crossbars and then haul them up and then affix their feet. Sometimes the crossbars would be in the middle to form a cross like we mainly see. Sometimes the crossbar would fit at the top, making a T. But because the crucifixion was seen just for criminals and slaves, the very early church didn't really talk about or didn't make pictures or art of Jesus on the cross. See, that group who had grown up knowing that crucifixion was for criminals, they didn't want to associate Jesus in that way. And so a lot of times when they talked about Jesus' death, they would use an image of a lamb and a cross, but not Jesus on the cross. And so really it wasn't until most of the people who witnessed crucifixions as a part of their daily life and time began to change, that it was later on in the first century when we began to see art with Jesus on a cross. Now the Renaissance came along and they loved crucifixion art. Because remember, they were trying to teach the masses the gospel stories through art. And they would add all sorts of figures, and they were known to add many of the crowds, and they would add all the details. Now we will see in some of our art the inscription above Jesus that was Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. And we saw or we heard in John where it says it was written in Hebrew, Latin, and Greek. In most of the art that we will look at in a minute, we will only see it in Latin, and we will see the abbreviation for that. And you'll see it. It says INRI, and that's the abbreviation or Latin abbreviation for Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. And so that's a little bit about the kind of history of the crucifixion as we see it in art. So I've got numerous pieces of art I want to show you as we look at, so we'll look at one. Okay, so this particular piece is called The Crucifixion of Jesus Christ on Calvary. And I learned in my research this week that the New York Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City has an entire exhibit that they show periodically called The Crucifixion and Passion of Christ in Italian Painting. So we get to, if you go to the Met, you would possibly get to see. This is a chromolithograph. I'm not really sure what that is, but you can tell the date. It's from 1491. And so if you look at this picture, this is one of those scenes that they try to get everything in it that they can, right? They want to get all different parts of it. And you may be able to see my cursor move on the screen, but So we see at the center of this figure, this painting, we see Jesus, right? Jesus on the cross. We can't see it, but the inscription is above. Okay, it would have been just what we talked about. This particular painting, again, it shows the whole picture. Shows the thieves crucified with him, one on the right, one on the left. Okay. Is anybody who want to chime in on something that you noted in this picture?
I'm not sure why, but my eyes kind of first went to the bottom left.
Oh,
Here. I'm not sure if that's meant to be Mary.
I think so. So down here, we have these people, okay? Really, you know, there could be 6 people here that seem to be in a little group. I would estimate that the one that looks like they're seated and their people are kind of gathered around is Mary, the mother of Jesus. And we just read the scripture story where Mary is there. I can pretty much, a gentleman in red is meant to be John, that they talk about the disciple whom Jesus loved. And from the cross, Jesus told John, you need to take care of my mother. Okay. And then we just read the scripture where they said there was Mary's sister. Did you hear that? Mary's sister was there. So this could be one of the women. That another Mary, wife of Clopas, was there. So that could be one of the women. And Mary Magdalene was there. Now, if you had to guess, just based on a kind of stereotypical images of Mary Magdalene, which one of these people down here in this left-hand corner might be Mary Magdalene? Which one would you guess?
I was gonna guess the one with like green and red right here. Is that?
That's the one I would guess. Now, yeah. I did not find a key, but look how she's got a long flowy hair, whereas the other women's hair is covered. Okay. And in today's world, it looks like this Mary has tattoos. I'm sure it's just decorated fabric, and then we have Mary Magdalene is also depicted in red. And so I do know that Mary Magdalene gets a bad reputation, and I don't think it is scripturally warranted, but this is art, and I think it was depicted in that way. So yes, these are the people. We're getting this in the scene. Did you see what's going on in the opposite, or not opposite, but bottom right-hand corner? If you could see that well, what do you think they might be doing down there? We read it in John. We just read it, what they're doing. They're casting lots for Jesus' clothing. And the scripture even said there were 4 of them, that parts of their his clothing was divided, and then they cast lots for the rest of it. I think that's interesting. Look what is between the two scenes we just talked about down here on the ground. What's that look like?
Bones.
Bones. Mm-hmm. And Golgotha was called the skull. Okay. So this piece of art tries to get everything. I'll highlight a few things, and then because I want to look at some more. We did not read this, but in other parts of the Passion story, it says they pierced Jesus' side with a spear, and see that it's literally doing that right now, depicted in this art. And if you look right beside Jesus' knee here going down, that looks like another type of pole. And my guess is that that's what they put the sponge and gave him the sour wine. How are these soldiers dressed? Are the soldiers dressed like first century people? No, not really. I don't think that helmet there does not look like a first century Roman helmet. It looks much more like an early Renaissance helmet. And so all these the crowd is gazing up. In the background, It's depicted the old city of Jerusalem. You can see the city wall. But look at the sky up at the very top. What does it look like is coming? It's not calm weather, right?
Yeah,
Looks like,
it looks like a bad storm.
looks like a bad storm. So this piece of art really it's a chaotic. I think Jonathan's used that word in a couple of other paintings. You see all the motion that's going around. It's chaotic, but it really depicts many of the parts of the crucifixion story in this art. All right, let's look at something else. One thing I wanted to mention, this Jesus shows a suffering Jesus on the cross, right? Skinny, you see blood, and his head's even down, okay? A bowed head. And that's the image that this picture wants to show. All right, let's look at something else. Okay, so this piece of art is called the Eisenheim Altarpiece. Okay, and it was put together by these two gentlemen here. Grunwald was the main artist, and it took years to complete. It was in the early 1500s. They are German, but it was kind of commissioned from someone in France, and it now resides in France. When it was originally commissioned, it was commissioned to go with the hospital, and that's going to give us some ideas. I show you this to look at the size of this piece of art, right? I mean, you can tell it is more than life size as far as what the characters, because these individuals standing here at the bottom don't even come up to the first part. This is a movable piece of art, meaning you have the centerpiece and you have side panels, and there's other side panels, so the scenes could change. All right, but we're just going to talk about this crucifixion scene. Now, I was able to find a piece that showed it, but it's not overly clear. So I'm going to show that next. See, it's slightly fuzzy, but I think it gives us a closer up picture. This was one of Karl Barth, a theologian. It was his favorite piece of kind of resurrection art. It was very influential for him. So I want to highlight a few things. So we have the Jesus hanging on the cross. Again, this Jesus looks very skinny. This is a suffering Christ on this. You see the INRI above, okay? Again, we see some figures over to the left, which probably is Mary in white. John, the disciple whom Jesus loved, in red. And I would make an assumption, again, by the color of the robe that is red, that is Mary Magdalene. Okay. But who do you think the character on the right is? The one holding a book? Any guess? Remember, art doesn't necessarily show a reality scene. But who do you think might be a biblical character that points to Jesus? I won't wait too long, because I didn't actually know. It's John the Baptist. Okay. So this Grunwald put John the Baptist in this crucifixion scene, but you see what John the Baptist is doing? He's pointing to Jesus. Now, in this picture, we see a lamb. Okay. And here's one thing that I read about it. It says, John the Baptist, who could only point to Christ crucified, as a faithful witness. So also is this our duty, to point to Jesus. Always to point to Jesus. I thought it was an interesting take on this piece of art. The foreground, the characters are like illuminated, but you can see storm in the background. Right? Definitely storm. Now, I mentioned that this piece was commissioned to be used in a hospital. And so we do have these side panels, which I knew nothing about until I read about this piece of art. The one on the left is Saint Sebastian, and the one on the right is Saint Anthony the Great. Okay. These two saints were thought to heal and protect the sick. Okay. And especially Saint Sebastian, whose aid was invoked to ward off the plague. And so we have these saints kind of protecting. And again, this piece of art was supposed to go in a hospital or near a hospital. And this is what somebody writes about this piece. Grunwald depicts Jesus' body ravaged by the crucifixion, yet invokes pointedly the Christian message of Jesus' horrible suffering. Originally intended for a hospital, the altar painting may have been designed to provide comfort and solstice to the sick. That was very interesting, that kind of mix a character in the crucifixion painting, a character that was already deceased before the crucifixion in John the Baptist to point to Jesus. And yet you have these medieval saints that help us invoke and think about the suffering of Jesus. It's a beautiful piece of art, and it's called an altarpiece. It stands on its own and again has those movable panels. All right, we better move on or we're not going to get to the rest of them. Anybody have a comment? Okay. All right, so the next piece of art is just called The Crucifixion, and it's by an artist called Peter Paul Rubens. Apparently Rubens liked crucifixion art. He had numerous different prints. This was, when I looked at this, was not a really big piece of art. So he has smaller paintings, but many of them are preserved, and they're very similar in style. So again, we really zoomed in on this part of the crucifixion. You have your Jesus. What do you see kind of above Jesus' head here? You look closely, you see kind of the holy glow. All right, we didn't see that on any of the other pieces of art yet, but this piece of art wanted us to remember Jesus' divinity. That's why they put that holy glow. You have above Jesus, again, the inscription that we would have. And you have three characters, these same three characters that pop up that stayed at the foot of the cross. Now, I chuckled when I saw this. If you grew up in the church and you were a child and you played Mary in some Christmas play, what color did you always have to wear? And that is blue. And so here, this has got to be the mother of Mary. I mean, Mary, the mother of Jesus. Right? And this is, I can envision this is the scene where Jesus is looking at Mary and John, who is in red, and he's telling, Mary, behold your son, meaning, John's going to take care of you. Okay. So you see those two characters, and then who do you think might be the character hugging the cross. That's got to be Mary Magdalene. That reminds me, this depiction of Mary Magdalene reminds me even of what I've seen in film in the way Mary Magdalene is played in Jesus Christ Superstar. I draw some parallels. And again, you get a little bit of calm clouds on the left-hand side of the picture, but if you look over in the right hand, storm is coming. Okay. And we've got some soldiers back over here. Maybe even, again, this is definitely a Renaissance soldier with the soldier and the feather in his hat. Okay. But then you got somebody with a head covering. So we don't know who these people are, but they're depicted as just observing the crucifixion. I think the main thing here is to show the divinity of Jesus with the glowy around the head, and then his side's already pierced, so you can see the drops of blood, and so the humanity. I just like this. If you're really interested, this Rubens, he has many others that you can find. All right, let's see here. We'll go on. All right, this is was another very old piece of art. Okay, this one's called the Crucifixion by Fra Angelico. It's a early 1400s, 1420, this piece of art. And it is one of the pieces of art found at the Met. So you could actually look at it. This particular piece of art definitely wants us to see the divinity of Jesus. Again, you've got the holy glow, almost that orb around his head. Okay, but you also see an orb around other people's, the people at the foot of the cross. So it's like the people that understand and have an inkling as to who Jesus is have an orb around their heads. The other people don't know what. I think this guy here in the middle on the left-hand side, he looks like he has a Santa hat on. So he definitely doesn't get this sacrificial nature of the Christ here. In this one, if you look in the bottom left, that is supposed to be, again, Mary, the mother of Jesus. And it's almost like she has collapsed. Right? And so you get the not only the suffering of Jesus here, but the suffering of those who had to witness the crucifixion. And that's a little different. The Romans, or the crowd on the horses, some of them are looking up. All right, there's one guy looking up. The one right beside the cross, you can tell he's holding a staff with a sponge on the top. Okay. And over on the far left, there's a guy who has a spear. Okay. But a couple of these people aren't even looking, they're looking at each other. It's like they're busy having their own conversation. They're kind of lost to the world. And so we don't know all the characters down here at the bottom, but we can assume Mary, the mother of Jesus. We can assume John, who was taking care, Mary Magdalene, possibly one of them in bright red. And remember, we just read there was Mary, wife of Clopas, and Mary, the mother of Jesus' sister. So that would account for those people around the cross. So I like this. This is the first time we see in resurrection art, or that I showed you, the angels. Okay. And again, that's to show the divinity of Jesus. It's like the angels were there to watch over him. Okay. Remember in the when Jesus was driven out into the desert, there's a phrase that said the angels ministered unto him. I get the angels are here. Really don't know anything more. Again, that's not scriptural. It's just kind of depicts the divinity of Jesus. There's a big circular nature to this piece of art. I think the gold at the top, it provides dimension. All right, so the ones we've seen, we definitely, some of the other ones have dark storm clouds coming. This is a very dim looking picture. A lot of pain in the faces of those that we see. But look at this next one. This is different. Look at this one. This one's called the Mond Crucifixion by Raphael, 1502, 1503. And you should see some immediate differences in this depiction. Okay. Do you see any dark storm clouds? No. Okay. It's a bright sunny day. It looks like here.
Say, this one just, it looks a little too pretty for what it's depicting.
Right. Look at that integral landscape in the back. It's a beautiful landscape picture with the cross in front. Okay. That is Raphael's style, I read, but it's very different. Okay. Look at the face of Jesus. I think the face of Jesus looks more calm, doesn't it? You don't see the suffering servant here. Okay. You do see the INRI clearly. It's one of the places you can see it. And you do have the people at the foot of the cross. They're gazing, two of them are looking up. And we know John, we would know Mary Magdalene, and one of those other women that followed around. But it is brighter. It's a more beautiful scene. So it does show it very different. I couldn't see it. I didn't have a well enough resolution picture, but Raphael's signature is inscribed into the foot of the cross somewhere. So if you were to actually see this piece of art in person, then you might be able to see the signature on the cross. Again, this was an Italian artist. And now we got angels. Okay, so we're focusing on the divinity of Jesus. And if you look closely, the angels have something in their hands. All right. Lauren, you get a good look at it. What do you think that he's holding?
So I'm gonna have to put my computer closer to my face. It's kind of hard to see.
Okay. Well,
I'm not sure I know what that is.
It's supposed, according to the artist, it's supposed to be a cup, like a chalice. And it's collecting the drops of blood from Jesus. That's what the angels are doing. And that's supposed to us to think about, Jesus, the communion, the cup of salvation, my blood poured out for you and for many for the forgiveness of sins. So although this is very bright compared to the other ones, it gives us a different picture of, Jesus' blood poured out for us that the angels are collecting. Let's see here. Looking at my notes to see if there's anything else I want to add. Oh, according to my notes here, one of these people at the bottom is a Saint Jerome. So it's Mary, the mother of Jesus, Mary Magdalene, Saint Jerome, and then John, the disciple. My guess is Saint Jerome had something to do with getting this piece commissioned. Okay, you got a piece commissioned, you hired the artist, and you probably could find yourself in the painting. And so one of this is supposedly Saint Jerome. Now, the next one is, I like this piece of art, and it's basically a modern piece of art. Okay. And here we go. Oh, no, wait a minute. No, oh, I skipped one. We'll go finish this one. This one was another more generic piece. Eugene Delacroix, is a French artist, Christ on the Cross, 1853, so a little more modern. It's not Renaissance art. Mention this one, we get a side view of Jesus here. Okay, we get a side view, but again, very similar as far as the characters. We have Mary, the mother of Jesus, that looks like she's fainted. Okay. We've got possibly Mary Magdalene, very close to the cross, looking up to Jesus. You've got soldiers with spears in the background. You've got a little bit of light trying to come through, but the storm clouds are coming. Okay. We do not get a clear view of Jesus' face here. It's not just the way it looks on the screen. I looked at it closely. Jesus is looking like off, and you just get a side, but you do see, the suffering that is going on. I want you to look at the very bottom right-hand corner of this piece of art. Do you see the gentleman over here? If you can see my cursor moving, this is a gentleman, and he's like holding his head, and he's turned away from the scene. We talked this morning about who that could be. We almost thought it depicted any of the disciples who could not stay at the foot of the cross but ran away. Maybe it was to be Peter, who denied Jesus 3 times, and his lament. But I think it's to help us see those who could not stay, but ran away. We hadn't seen a character like that in the pictures that we showed. All right, so this next one is the more modern. Okay, and there's my cursor. There we go. So if you are into art at all, you might recognize Salvador Dali. Okay, he is a more modern artist. This was a 1951 piece of art, and very, very different. Okay, let me read a little bit about what it says. He was a notorious Spanish surrealist painter, and this piece of art is called Christ of St. John on the Cross. It uses Dali's usual depiction, and that is that Christ floats over a darkened sky, reflected by a shore beneath, in which a fishing boat is moored. Now, this bird's eye view perspective and composition, they were influenced by a Spanish mystic, okay, that sketched a piece. And they said that there was some mythical or mysterious vision that the artist had, and that's why he ended up painting it this way. So Jesus is on the cross, right? This unique angle. We have the dark sky that we see common in the paintings, over a body of water. And we get this image, to make your fishers of people. Okay. Jesus spent a lot of time around the Sea of Galilee, and we get the fishing boat scene here. Now, ironically, what I read, the lake and the mountains around the lake, was actually almost a scenery of where Dali was when he was painting this. But it reminded me of the Sea of Galilee and fishing for Jesus. I think if you remember some things Jonathan said, that we're supposed to like see a triangle here, maybe depicted by the hands of Jesus going down to his feet. It's like a triangle. And that's again to remind us of the Trinity. And then also a circle. I think his arms create a part of a circle, and that again is something in art. Not as much in modern art, but I think Dali was trying to touch on some of the same images that we even see in the famous Last Supper piece. So here's an interesting thing. In order for Dali to get a viewpoint of what this would even look like, taking it from his mind and putting it on canvas, he hired a Hollywood stuntman to be hung up a little bit, suspended in some overhead manner, so that the artist could see how the human body would look from that weird angle that we have. And how the artist could envision the pull of gravity on the human body. So it's a very interesting way. He went to a lot of trouble to get this viewpoint on this piece of art. All right, we've got time. I think this is one of my favorites. It's very, very different. Okay? All right, this next one, well, maybe is my favorite. And so all of the art we've looked at so far is more flat art, except for the altarpiece. These are paintings, okay? But this next piece is a sculpture. My water went down the wrong way. So this piece of sculpture is the Pietà. And it is a sculpture by Michelangelo, done at the very end of the 15th century, or 1498, 99. And it is really the scene after Jesus has died. They've taken Jesus down from the cross, and that is Mary, the mother of Jesus, holding her son. It's a Renaissance sculpture, and again by Michelangelo. And this particular sculpture is in St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican. So it's in the Vatican City, located in the middle of Rome. So this is a close-up view. It's a beautiful, Michelangelo sculpture, and you can almost see the broken body of Jesus, right? I just think it's amazing. You can get so much fluidity out of stone. That's what Michelangelo was able to do. It's made out of marble, actually. That's what it is carved out of. So that, if you get a close-up views on the left, if you look on the right, this is an actual photograph. It's my photograph of when I went to the Vatican City and in St. Peter's Basilica. And if you look closely, you can see, do you see all the like plexiglass in front of it? You can't get that close to it. Let me tell you why. So over the years, they've moved this sculpture around in the Vatican. Even in the 1700s, they broke off a couple of Mary's fingers, probably the fingers that are sticking out. You see how she's holding that hand out? Those have already been repaired. But on May 21st, 1972, on the day of Pentecost, there was a mentally disturbed man who burst into, or was maybe just, you're allowed to walk around, but he walked into the chapel and attacked this sculpture with the geologist hammer. And they said specifically that he got, what was it say, 15 blows to Mary's arm and broke off Mary's arm. So that's the part that we see that the hand was already broken. Broke off Mary's arm, knocked a chunk of her nose off, and chipped one of her eyelids. So you can imagine here, this chaos is going on. He was quickly tackled and subdued. But if they've broken off and their nose, those little pieces of marble then are all laying around. And some people begin to pick up that marble and keep it. And so when they went, things calmed down. That said the onlookers took those pieces of marble that flew off. Later, some of the pieces were returned, but many were not, including Mary's nose. So in 1972, somebody who was at the Vatican is probably picked up Mary's nose from this piece of art. They took a piece of marble from the back of the sculpture and were able to fix her nose. And so after it was repaired, it took a while. It was put back in this place, and that is now bulletproof acrylic glass in front of this piece of art, so that it would not be damaged anymore. But I love this. This is probably one of my favorite. And it's not the crucifixion scene. And I probably love it because it's one of these, it's the only piece of this I've actually seen in person. And if you ever get a chance to see art in person, it touches you in a different way. Well, I just love the Mary cradling her son. Now that's a lot about art. I want to mention one other thing in our last few minutes. So we talked about art and film, and crucifixion is shown in many films. And as I was preparing for this, I was not prepared to even show a crucifixion scene. They're difficult to watch, okay? But you can find them in many movies. So there's many examples of the crucifixion in film. They're often very graphic. The still that I show here is actually not crucifixion of Jesus, but is a still from the movie Spartacus. Okay, I bet Corinne's seen the movie Spartacus, and it was a classic. And you can, and I put this here to show how common crucifixion was. Okay, these were thieves or insurrectionists or somebody, and they were just all strung up here. And so this is from the movie Spartacus. Now you may have heard of the famous movie Ben-Hur and the chariot races. Right? There is a scene in Ben-Hur where he is witnessing the crucifixion. Okay, so that's an interesting one. More modern depictions, we see there's a crucifixion scene in The Passion of Christ, the one done by Mel Gibson. When it came out, it got a lot of unusual or a lot of criticism for its incredibly graphic nature. I have never actually seen but a few moments. I could not watch the clip, but it shows very graphic. And there's another scene in a movie called The Last Temptation of Christ. So if you're interested in how it's depicted in film, you can just find most of these scenes by Googling them and find YouTube. There's a movie called Jesus of Nazareth that has crucifixion scene. And although many of these other ones are really too graphic for my taste, I, like most people, just don't want to see it. You wonder why people ran away from the bottom of the cross. Okay. But you can find, like in the musical Jesus Christ Superstar, most of us could probably watch that and be okay. But I did want to mention that I did choose not to show any of those, but that you could find them, and that as a general rule, they're graphic, and like, especially the disciples who felt like they couldn't stay and watch their suffering Jesus, we kind of have those similar thoughts. Well, that's about it. I used most of our time. Any of you that are with us on Zoom have a question or comment? And those of you that watch us on Facebook, if you go or you watch this at a later time and you have a comment, just contact me and we could discuss that way. So I hope you've enjoyed learning more about the Passion story here in this season of Lent, and how it's been depicted throughout centuries in art, and then more recently in film. That comes to the end of our time. I can stop share and we can just say, and everybody have a blessed evening. And I hope you've enjoyed it and learned a little bit about art and crucifixion, and especially things that we can keep in mind in going through this Lenten season. Have a good night, everybody. Good to see you.
Angela.
Yeah.